craftsman come in from Texas. He's Chris down, a law professor down in Texas. He has been a lawyer, 30, under 30?
I was 30 under 30.
Not 30 under 30.
Not under 30 anymore.
Yeah, he still keeps it on his resume. He's spoken from Congress 2 times. He's a very active member in our club, and he was excited to come out and discuss 3D printed guns in the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. So without further ado, Professor Josh Blackman.
Thank you so much. This is my first time in New Mexico. I'm happy to be here. I woke up this morning, looked at the windows, these hot air balloons floating in the sky. It was beautiful, so I'm very, very happy to be here. Also happy to see my friend Josh Kastenberg. We worked together at the Department of Defense in Arlington, oh my God, over a decade ago. So I haven't seen him since, so it's very happy to see here. Was it? It was a ways back. I went to law school at George Mason, which was very close to the DoD where we worked, and it was a very good place. I had a lot of good memories there. You are all in for a treat today. You get not only one constitutional amendment, you get 2. Our topic today is the interaction of the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and 3D printed guns. So first off, who here has ever used a 3D printer? A couple hands, what'd you make?
A variety of things, everything from a cat to a bracelet.
You made a cat?
Like a cat.
I bet you. Yeah. An edible pancake? You 3D printed dough? That's kind of cool. Was it tasty? No, it was gross. What else? Anyone else? That's another hand. Yeah, right there. Okay, architecture. Okay, that's a little bit less tasty, but I'll cut you some slack, or flapjack, I should say. 3D printing is not a new technology, but it's really taken off in the last decade or so. At the most basic level, 3D printing allows you to design an object on the screen. Maybe a car, maybe the architectural blueprints of a house, and then you can transform those objects into a real-life object. So let me give you a brief tutorial in how 3D printing works. Let's say I want to make a cylinder, right? Like a bottle of water, a cylinder. If I tell you that you have a cylinder with a height of 20 inches and a radius of 5, you will know roughly what that object looks like. That's all 3D printing is. You're telling a computer dimensions, width of this, height of that, shape like this, thickness of that, right? And by giving very simple instructions, which anyone in this room can understand, you can tell a 3D printer what to create. You can make little trinkets, doodads. This is actually a race car that's being created by a 3D printer. You can also make models of human anatomy with a 3D printer. Now let me explain to you how a 3D printer works. Has everyone here made a candle before? Right? A candle. Okay, how do you make a candle? You take the wick, you dip in wax, you pull it out. You dip it in wax, you pull it out, right? And you keep dipping it. And every time you dip the wick, it gets a little thicker around the base. 3D printing works in the same fashion. You add one layer of plastic on top of another on top of another. So look at this diagram. You have a little nozzle, and it sprays a very thin layer of plastic, one on top of the other, on top of the other. And the goal is to make an object, here a ball. This is from a different perspective, and something you have a heated bed to keep it nice and warm. All right? Now I want to show you a demonstration of 3D printing an object. I'm not going to tell you what's being printed. You have to guess, okay? All right, so ready? I'm going to show you a series of pictures. Picture number 1. The first layer is sort of honeycomb lattice. It's hexagons. It's a very strong base with which to 3D print. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2 gets a little bit taller. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Anyone see it yet? Jabba, you're really close. Really? Huh? Ooh, who said it? Yoda. Where? There. You got it. It's Yoda. This is the earliest picture people get it, so you actually were very good. No one's ever gotten with this picture, but occasionally you get it number 5. So it's Yoda. Let's see if you can see it. This is 5, 6, 7. Oh, now you start seeing it, right? 8. Oh, there it is. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and finish off the top, 18, right? Maybe I need Baby Yoda now, maybe make it a little more timely. But this is how 3D printing operates. It's a very simple technology and lets you create things that are pretty accurate. That looks a heck of a lot like Yoda. Now, if you gave me a block of clay, I could not mold that. If you gave me a piece of stone, I could not chisel that. If you gave me a piece of wood, I could not carve that. But if you gave me a 3D printer and a laptop, yeah, I could build that pretty quickly, in fact. Okay? 3D printing allows you to build innovative new designs with relative ease. Okay? Now, the good people at the New Mexico Federalist chapter did not invite me here today to talk about printing Yoda. No. If we were just printing Yoda, no one would care. They invited me to talk about 3D printing guns. And this is an issue that I have a lot of personal experience with. Since 2014, I've served as one of the lawyers in the litigation involving 3D printed guns. Yes, I defend the guy who put these files on the internet. His name is Cody Wilson, and the company is called Defense Distributed. And in 2014, he put himself on the map. Actually, even earlier, in 2012, he put himself on the map when he built something known as the Liberator. What is the Liberator? The Liberator is the first fully functional 3D printed gun. He also created a plastic receiver for an AR-15. This is the guts that makes a gun operate. He also created a 3D printed magazine for most semi-automatic rifles. But what really put Cody and Defense Distributed on the map was this. Josh, what the heck is this? What do we look in here, right? These are the parts needed to assemble the Liberator. The blue thing is the handle of the gun. This big white thing is the receiver. This round thing is the barrel of the gun. These little squiggly things are the springs that you pull back to create the action. The only metal parts of the gun are the bullet, which are made of metal, and a common household nail that's used as a firing pin. This is what the Liberator looks like fully assembled. Now let me tell you, this is a terrible gun. You would not want to ever fire this gun. Let me give you a couple of reasons why. First, it's a single shot pistol. It holds one bullet, and you're lucky if it fires. Why? Well, do you see this rope on the floor near the gun? Does anyone want to guess why there's a rope there near the gun when they were testing it? You want to guess? Yeah? It's not safe at all. Let me tell you something, my friends. Plastic is an absolutely terrible material to make a gun out of. Why? What happens when plastic gets hot? It melts. What happens when plastic gets cold? It cracks. When you fire a gun, it goes from hot to cold real quick. This gun is more likely to blow up in your hand than actually fire. Right? Steel is a good material for a gun because when it heats, it expands. When it cools, it contracts. It's a very good property of steel. So these guns are not safe. In fact, very few people who ever actually download the files ever print them because it's very hard to make it designed not to blow up in your hand. You actually have to treat the plastic with this special chemical bath with acetone to harden the plastic enough so it won't blow up in your hand. Now people ask, oh Josh, won't plastics get better? Look, I've been doing this for almost a decade now. Plastic hasn't gotten much stronger, right? There are limits on how strong plastic can get, and they're not designed to withstand an internal combustion. That's just not what it's designed to do. So plastic guns may scare you, but this is not a realistic threat. If I want a dangerous gun, I'll just buy a gun in the black market, hell of a lot cheaper than printing it myself, and a lot more effective. But let's talk about it for a minute. This is what the Liberator looks like when it's all finished and proper in a nice case. Okay. Is there a problem with 3D printing a gun? Now, usually when I say 3D printed gun, this is what you have in mind, right? You just click print and a gun pops out. Not even close. The process to make a Liberator is expensive. It might take 40 hours of labor to print all the parts, assemble them, treat them with chemicals, and make them even possibly work. So this is not an easy process. It requires actually a lot of skill. Even if you download the files, you have to make a lot of judgment calls on how to what's called slice the files, how to make different thicknesses and thinness and different dimensions and materials. So there's a lot of decisions you have to make that require intervention. This is not just point, click, shoot, right? It's not just you click a gun and the gun pops out. But let me tell you something, my friends. Making a gun is a lot easier. Who here knows what a zip gun is? Yeah. Exactly. A zip gun is a homemade gun made from parts you can buy at the hardware store. I found a few designs online. Don't try this at home. This is a gun manufactured from a soldering iron and a garden hose nozzle, right? I can take you to Home Depot, spend about $10 worth of parts, and make a gun that's a hell of a lot stronger than a 3D printed gun. What about this one? This one I thought was creative. They took a little keychain flashlight, hollowed out the middle, and put in a firing mechanism. It's a keychain flashlight, maybe about this big. Fully functional gun, lethal weapon. Now, let me show you a demonstration. Do not try this at home. Please, please, please don't try this at home. Okay? These idiots, and you'll see why they're idiots in a minute, these idiots are going to make a rifle out of a rubber tube and a metal pipe. That's it. And they're recording with a flip phone, so this is legit. This is really this is serious business. We're talking. They're not messing around with their flip phone. Okay. I'm not going to play the video because there's a lot of cursing. So let me just show you some stills. Okay. At the end of the metal pipe is this little dimple, and that dimple is going to be used to puncture the back of the shotgun shell, basically a firing pin, if you will. Okay? So these guys load the shotgun shell into the back of this rubber tube. And again, a rubber tube will not trigger metal detector. It's a very cheap item. All right. What's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this picture, my friends? Anyone see what's wrong with this picture? A lot of things are wrong with it. Okay, so first off, his hand is in front of the firing tube. Yeah, okay, what else is wrong with this picture? They're indoors. They are firing a gun indoors. But they're not just indoors. Look at what they're aiming at. A cardboard box. And let me show you the next frame where it's a little more obvious. What is right behind this cardboard box? Plugged into a fan. Okay, so these guys are idiots. I can't stress you, don't try this at home. But I use this video to demonstrate how easy it is to make a gun. You don't need a 3D printer. You don't need plastic. You need two idiots and a couple of beers and a rubber tube, okay? Now ready? Ready for this? I'm gonna fire it. 1, 2, boom. Lethal weapon. Perfectly functional shotgun shell. And you can see there are holes on this box. They've done this before. You even see the got ripped apart over there. So these guys are idiots. But they made a weapon. Look how proud they are. It's smoking. It's a shotgun shell. Look how cool they are. Why do I show you this picture? It's easy to make a gun. Did they break the law? I'll limit myself to federal law because the state law does vary from state to state. But did they violate state law? I'm sorry, did they violate federal law? The answer is no. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms takes the position that what they did is illegal. You can make your own gun, and you don't need a background check. You don't need a license. You don't need anything. You can't sell the gun. If you put the gun into what's called a stream of commerce, you need a license. Those are hard to get. What's called a FFA, Federal Firearm License. I'm sorry, FFL. FFA is Future Farmers of America. Rodeo season, right? Rodeo season's in Houston now. But the FFL is a very hard license to obtain. All right? So then what's the problem? If it's perfectly legal to 3D print a gun, excuse me, or make a gun out of a rubber tube, why am I here, right? Why is this a legal issue if this is perfectly fine? The government has not tried to stop people from 3D printing these guns. Excuse me. Excuse me. Instead, they've tried to stop the problem at the source. They've tried to make it illegal to share the files needed to 3D print the guns. And that's where the First Amendment kicks in. The First Amendment places limits on the government's power to restrict speech. At the most basic level, the First Amendment says no prior restraints of speech. The government might be able to punish you after you speak, but they can't stop you from speaking in advance unless there's a really, really, really good reason for doing so. And the court has been very skeptical of efforts to stop speech in advance. And some of that speech can be quite dangerous. I see people smiling. Who here has heard of the Anarchist Cookbook? Oh, my friends in the back. Yes, your hands go up, exactly. Look, this is a book that basically tells you how to be a terrorist, right? I'm only slightly exaggerating. How to make bombs, how to make poisons, how to do some pretty bad stuff. And if you follow the instructions in this book, you can do some damage. When this book was popular in the 60s and 70s, there were efforts to ban it, to actually remove it from bookshelves, from bookstores. And the courts were fairly consistent, saying, no, no, no. The mere fact that speech can show you how to commit a crime doesn't mean you can ban the book itself. But you might say, wait a minute, Josh. No, 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 no. That's a book. We're dealing here with code. Well, this is an open question, right? Information is speech. And the court has in recent years strongly hinted that code receives First Amendment protection. For example, in a case called Sorrell versus IMS Health, the Supreme Court said that the creation and dissemination of information are speech. The lower courts have sort of divided on this issue. They've said some types of code is protected, other types of code is not. I think the code we have here is expressive. It conveys information on its own. It's not what you might call machine code. I think we're protected by the First Amendment. And so far, the courts haven't ruled on this issue directly. I'll get to our litigation in a minute, but they sort of really want to avoid this question. I promise you not one constitutional right, but two. Our case also implicates the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment provides a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What does the Second Amendment mean? In a 2008 case called D.C. v. Heller, the Supreme Court reaffirmed that the Second Amendment guarantees an individual right. This right is in no way tied to any sort of militia service. And 2 years later, McDonald v. Chicago, the court said that the Second Amendment restricts not only federal power, but also state power. As a result, federal bans in both the District of Columbia and the city of Chicago were declared unconstitutional. Since Heller, the court hasn't said much about the Second Amendment, barely said anything, in fact. There's a single case this term on the Second Amendment at the court. That case will probably be dismissed on mootness grounds any day now, maybe. But we have very little about what the Second Amendment means. So I have two theories which I'll put forward. And I think the Second Amendment protects what you might call right to acquire arms. So imagine the government has a law that says, if you have a gun, you can keep it, but it is now a crime to buy any new guns. No one can buy any new guns. And if you just turned 21, too bad, you can never get a gun. I think such a law would be unconstitutional. At the very basic level, the right to bear arms means you have to get the guns from somewhere. And generally people get guns by buying them. Now this doesn't mean that all restrictions on the sale of arms are unconstitutional. I think background checks could work and those sorts of things, but at a basic level there's a right to acquire arms. The second right I'm actually a little bit more confident about. It's what I call the right to make arms. The right to make arms, okay? This is a very old right. Long before there was Walmart and Dick's and other sorts of sporting goods stores, if you wanted a gun, you had to make it, or at least find a gunsmith. And there's a very deeply rooted tradition of people making their own arms. To this day, there's a robust community of people who build their own guns, and under federal law, it's perfectly legal. So I think the Second Amendment has both this right to acquire and right to make arms. Why is that important? This is a case that's not just about the First Amendment standing by itself, or the Second Amendment standing by itself. Here, these two rights reinforce each other. It's what the courts have called a hybrid right. And think of it this way. You are speaking about how to make an arm, right? You're speaking about the exercise of another right. I'll give you an example. Let's say the government passes a law that makes it a crime to wish someone a Merry Christmas. Can't say Merry Christmas, an actual war on Christmas, right? Would that law violate the freedom of speech, or would that law violate the free exercise of religion? Or both? In this sense, rights reinforce each other, right? Another example, let's say the government passes a law that bans printing books on how to perform an abortion, right? Would this violate the freedom of speech or the 14th Amendment abortion jurisprudence, or both? So I think in some regards, when you stop someone from speaking about the exercise of constitutional right, even greater scrutiny is required of those laws. Again, we are not arguing the right to print the guns. Being very careful here. The right itself is just merely to share the information of how to print it. We've never once said in court that we want a right to print the guns, although I think you could make that argument as well. What laws exist now? The leading law that's been in the books for 30 years is the Undetectable Firearms Act. The Undetectable Firearms Act. It was enacted in 1988. 1988? Wait a minute, Josh. I thought you said plastic guns were new. No, they're not, right? Undetectable guns have been around for a very long time. This law says that any gun must have a certain quantity of metal in it that would trigger a metal detector, right? I'm okay with this law. And in fact, the Liberator was designed to comply with it because there's a block of metal that's soldered into the handle. If you don't put that in there, the gun's illegal. But I think the design calls for that plan. Why were people worried about this in the 80s? Well, people learned about the Glock Handgun. The Glock is a very popular handgun. It was made perhaps most famous by Bruce Willis in the Die Hard movie. He had this line, he says, "Luggage? That punk pulled the Glock 7 on me. You know what that is? It's a porcelain gun made in Germany. It doesn't show up on your airport X-ray machines here, and it costs more than what you make in a month." Every part of that sentence is false, okay? There is no Glock 7. That model doesn't exist. It's not made of porcelain, it's made out of metal. It's not made in Germany, it's made in Austria. It will show up in an airport X-ray machine, and they're quite affordable. But people panic because of movies now and then, and that's why we have this sort of hysteria about plastic Glock guns, which are not even made out of plastic. Okay? In more recent years, there have been efforts to ban 3D guns. Shortly after Cody made headlines, Senator Schumer of New York tried to put forward a bill that would ban them. The bill was killed in the Senate. Some people said, well, maybe we can ban the materials, right? Let's ban plastic so people can't 3D print guns. Guess what, guys? You can 3D print plastic, and you can 3D print metal. This is a 1911 handgun made entirely with a 3D printer. Now, you wouldn't want to do this, right? You can buy a 1911 gun for a few $100. This costs about $40,000 to make. It's a very expensive gun. It's a prototype, but it shows that you can basically 3D print any material. Of course, a metal gun will be detected by a metal detector that perhaps scares away some of the paranoia. Okay. The major means that the government has used to try and stop 3D printed guns to date has not been domestic law. It's been what's called export control law. You may never be exposed to this in law school, but I'll give you a brief tutorial. There's a system of rules called ITAR, the International Traffic in Arms Regulation. What is ITAR? It's a series of rules that restrict sending certain types of dangerous stuff abroad. So for example, if I want to send a Stinger missile to Afghanistan, I probably need the government's permission to do so. I think that's a good idea. If I want to send the blueprints to a classified nuclear submarine to China, I should probably get the government's permission first. I think we all agree those are probably good ideas. So ITAR has been this regime that when you want to send certain technology overseas, you need to get permission from the government. And I don't object to this in the abstract. I think it makes some sense. But for the first time ever, the government extended this doctrine to data, technical data that was in the public domain. The code that was put online was not classified. It was open source, right? Never before the government applied this ITAR regime to public speech in this fashion. In fact, there's some old opinions of the Office of Legal Counsel saying you can't do this. But the State Department under the Obama administration sent a letter, and they argued that this speech, this code, violates the export control laws. And they ordered defense distributors to take down the files immediately. That means right away. And the failure to take them down could result in criminal prosecution for violating export control laws. We're looking at many years in prison. Okay? Everyone with me? Okay. This was 2013. And in 2013, the government sent this letter from the State Department, and Defense Distributed took down the material. But they put together a legal case. And I didn't really know much about it. I wrote an article about 3D printed guns, which was published in a law review at Tennessee. And I was like, okay, that's fun. You know, we write articles, no one reads them. Well, someone read my article. Actually, professors. Most people don't read articles. But someone read my article. Who read it? Cody. And I got an email out of the blue from Cody Wilson who said, Josh, I want to hire you to sue the government. And I said, you're insane. No way, no way, no way. And he said, no, give me a call. So we spoke on the phone for a bit, and I learned more about his case, and I realized he actually had a decent case. So then we put together a team of lawyers, and we filed a lawsuit in 2015. And I was working on the case now for almost 5 years. I will give you a brief summary of the litigation. It's been going on for a long time. Initially, we filed a lawsuit in the district court in Texas, in Austin, and we argue that this federal export control regime violates the First Amendment, violates the Second Amendment, also violates due process, and there are also some statutory issues which you don't care about, I know. The district court ruled against us. He said, well, I'll assume that your code is speech, but I find under some sort of intermediate scrutiny balancing test, the regulation survives. And we argued that intermediate scrutiny was not appropriate. We appealed to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit didn't agree with the district court. In fact, it cast some doubt. But it basically said this is at an interlocutory stage. There's a preliminary injunction that was being sought. There's not enough here, but maybe if you come back later, we'll take a closer look at it. Sort of a dodge, a duck, if you will. We then had a dissent. And the dissent was very vigorous by Judge Jones in Texas. And she wrote that this is a violation of the First Amendment. We petitioned for a hearing en banc. And we got, I think, 4 or 5 votes for en banc, but not enough to flip the court. And the dissenter said that this is a First Amendment violation. We petitioned the Supreme Court for certiorari. Didn't work. We did not get a grant. At that time, the case went back down to the district court. We were actually feeling pretty good because the Fifth Circuit kind of signaled that if this comes up on a summary judgment motion rather than a motion for preliminary injunction, the equities might be a little different. Feeling good. The district court then ordered us to engage in settlement discussions, which they always do, and we were able to reach a settlement with the government. And the government basically acknowledged that this regime probably violates the First Amendment. By the way, there's an election that happened in between, which perhaps helped, but we were still feeling good independent of the election. The government decided to give us a settlement. They said, you know what, we will give you a license to print these, to put these files online, and we will engage in a rulemaking to change the legal doctrine. So we were feeling pretty good. But then things took a turn for the worse. We announced a settlement, and we said that the settlement would go into effect, I'll say on Monday. The dates are actually not important. The settlement will go into effect on Monday, and that's when the files would be posted online. The prior week, we get this emergency motion filed in district court in Austin. And these various gun control groups sued, saying we need to block the settlement. The Brady campaign, Gabby Giffords, Michael Bloomberg, Every Town for Gun Safety, whatever his group is called, right? Moms Against Violence, all these groups sued us. And they argued that this settlement was improper. So I did what I had to do. I went to court, and they argued the TRO. And I said that these people have no standing to block our settlement, and that we should be able to go ahead. And I won, right? The judge agreed, said that these outside groups had no injury, there's no standing, therefore the settlement can go forward. We got the settlement on Friday afternoon. At that point, we recognized that something was going on, and we were about to get slaughtered, right? This gun control group was just the first wave. So I told Cody, I was like, Cody, put the files online right now. We had our license in hand. Don't wait till Monday. Do it immediately. Don't tell anyone, but put the files online now. That was significant because once files are online, I thought, courts are going to be less willing to tell you to take it down, right? Once it's out there, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's like, oh, you know what? Put them out there. Let's see what happens. I also thought, maybe we should go on offense. And I started putting together a complaint in which we would sue some of the states that were threatening us. But here's what happened. On Sunday, I get a phone call from a lawyer from the Pennsylvania Attorney General. And he was seeking a TRO, a temporary restraining order, to block us from posting these files. I told the guy, I was like, look, we've already posted them. He's like, what? I was like, they're online already. He's like, no, they're not. I'm like, yeah, they are. I gave him a link. And he's like, well, he had spent the entire weekend preparing his papers and didn't bother checking the damn site to see that they were posted. But he filed his TRO anyway. And you know what happened? A judge on Sunday afternoon called an emergency hearing. And let me tell you guys, you're law students, when a judge says get on the phone, you get on the damn phone. So the judge was in Philadelphia. I was actually in New York at the time. The other lawyers were in Philadelphia. So I had to take the phone call. And where did I take this call? At an airport. I had a flight that day. I was at the United Lounge at the LaGuardia Airport, which is one of the worst airports in the world. Maybe the United States. I'm slightly exaggerating. And I made my argument on this very crappy conference call line where I could barely hear what was going on. But I made the arguments. And I was able to tell the judge, look, Judge, I'll tell you what. We'll block any Pennsylvania IP address. Just deny the TRO. Let's come back for a PI next week. And the judge said, fine. So he denied the TRO. Oh, good. Josh is 2 for 2, right? Batting 1,000. It goes on. We then got another lawsuit, New Jersey. The New Jersey Attorney General sued us for another TRO to block us from posting the files online. They were already online. And where did he sue us? Not in federal court. He sued us in Chancery Court. Do you even have Chancery Court in this state? It's basically a court of equity, right? If your neighbor is making a lot of noise and you want a nuisance, right, injunction, you go to a court of equity, right, a court of Chancery. The New Jersey AG, I'm not kidding you, sought a nationwide injunction against a Texas corporation in a Chancery Court. And I remember telling this judge in New Jersey, this chancery judge, like, Your Honor, with all due respect, I don't think you have jurisdiction to issue a nationwide injunction. And he said, I think you're right, Mr. Blackman. So I was able to do the same sort of argument. I said, look, we'll block New Jersey IP addresses, just deny the TRO, we'll come back in a week to the PI. And he said, you know what, I'll agree. On balance, because of the First Amendment, he denied the TRO. I'm like, oh man, Josh, this is great. I'm going 3 for 3. I'm batting 1,000, right? My winning streak would come to an end very, very quickly. Very quickly. What happens next? The Washington Attorney General in Seattle files a lawsuit on behalf of 20 state attorneys general. And they sought a judgment not just against us, but against the State Department to block our settlement. Again, by the way, New Jersey sued us twice in 2 different courts for the same relief. I'm pretty sure you can't do that. There's some rules against that, but never got in trouble. The Washington AG sued us. And I had to argue this one by phone because I couldn't be in 2 coasts at the exact same time. It's not humanly possible. I've mastered air travel, but I haven't figured the 2 places at once thing yet. So I'm arguing here and talking about the First Amendment, and the judge in Seattle doesn't seem very interested. And the judge in Seattle asked me one question. He asked me, Mr. Blackman, do you represent all the parties before this case? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, thank you. Why did he ask me that question? To make sure his injunction would stick. And shortly after the argument finished by phone, he entered his injunction and he made it nationwide in scope. At that point, I had to call Cody and say, Cody, take down the site. Take down the site. Which is a hard thing to do. I mean, you'll have this. You'll tell a client you lost your case, right? Maybe you lost the case, you're remanded to custody, right? You've lost your case, you have to pay some judgment. There are no more appeals to be had. And in our case, I told my client, you lost the case, take down your website, which was actually quite difficult. He built a lot of redundancies against hackers. So there actually was a lot of work that we done to actually remove the site. It took a couple hours, and I said, do it as quickly as you can, because there was then an injunction. In theory, he could have been held in contempt of court for not having it down immediately. You can't take down a site immediately with these security measures, but we did it as quickly as we reasonably could. And that was the end of my wild ride that lasted about a week, where I had basically 4 TRO hearings in 5 days. I won 3 of them, lost the 4th. Oh well. But the case isn't over. We are now litigating in, my goodness, my friends, the 3rd Circuit, the 5th Circuit, and the 9th Circuit. We have 3 appeals that are more or less all on separate tracks. My hope is we get some victories in the Court of Appeals in the next year or so, and maybe this case goes to the Supreme Court eventually. The good news is the files are out there. Google, you can find them in 2 seconds. They're not on the dark web, they're in the open web. Find them anywhere you want. They're very easy to find. No matter what the injunction says, we got our files out there. I think we had a victory in that front. But at the more basic level, this is a case about free speech. You may not like guns. You may not like plastic guns. I get it. My parents hate this case. They don't like me even doing it. But there are important free speech values here. If the government can stop you from posting the information about 3D printed guns, and the government can stop lots of other types of censorship, and that's something I worry about deeply. Even if you don't care about guns, you should care about free speech on the internet. And this is something we're fighting for as much as we can. I appreciate your attention. Welcome any questions you may have. Thank you all so much. The first question from my good friend from the... Mhm. Very good question. These export control regimes are unpopular. Who hates them? universities. Universities hate them because it makes it impossible for scientists to collaborate with other research institutions in other countries. Right? Let's say that you're doing a project with the University of Mexico or in Canada or anywhere else. You can't, because if they're foreign nationals, you can't send this information. In any sane world, all the various development groups, lobby for industry, will be supporting us. But they're not, because guns, right? It just becomes a toxic case. In fact, there's some litigation now where we are not filing amicus briefs deliberately because we want to make sure that this promotion of useful arts and sciences is secured. So I think your question, Josh, is well stated. At bottom, this is restricting creativity. All we're talking about is creating files on a screen. We're not arguing about printing it. I should be very clear on that point. So I think that does change the case a little bit. But so far, we've not gotten much leeway in the courts. Maybe we'll succeed later. Yes, Emil.
Prototypes were a lot smarter than I am now.
And he's very smart.
And were to be able to design on myself, on my own, a nuclear weapon. And I want to put those plans out online. It's so wide, if not wide.
It's a good question. So a few points on nuclear weapons. The Supreme Court has seemed to say that certain types of classified information is outside the scope of the First Amendment. So there was an old case from the 70s called The Progressive, where this magazine wanted to publish the blueprints to make a hydrogen bomb, the H-bomb, right?
I invented this myself. So I said, I came up with
Right.
I didn't steal it from them. I didn't steal government classified information. Because I think it was
Right. So I think the hypothetical is, if this is information in the public domain, I think it's a lot harder to censor. I do. One upshot of our case, which is perhaps a poor choice of words, is we're making handguns. And Heller recognized that handguns are the quintessential weapon protected by the Second Amendment. I think the case might be slightly different if you're printing, or if you're trying to print weapons that are beyond the scope of the First Amendment, or Second Amendment. But if all you're talking about is the blueprints for a nuclear weapon that you made yourself, I think that's protected speech. Yes, over there, yeah? Yeah, right there. Mm-hmm. Okay, very good question. Thank you. So a few points of response. First, Heller said that the handgun was a quintessential weapon, but they didn't define the full scope of arms. I think, for example, the AR-15 would be well within the scope of the Second Amendment. It's a gun owned by millions of Americans. Now, to your second point, which is one I get quite a bit, how can the people ever match wits with this institutional military, with fighter jets and aircraft carriers and the like? My response, how long were we in Afghanistan? 20 years? What kind of arms did they have? Mostly small arms. They didn't have aircraft carriers. They didn't have jets. How long were we in Vietnam? Right? If you actually want to look at what a war looks like on the ground, small arms can do a lot of damage. It can be quite effective. I think you have a war of attrition almost, right? Would our professional trained military take up arms against their fellow citizens, right? Even police, local police departments are often very afraid if they know someone's armed. They're more hesitant. I view this sort of anti-insurrection model as almost like the sword of Damocles. It's an old Greek myth where there was a sword that hangs over someone's head by a thread. And the sword's hanging there. The thread doesn't need to snap, the sword's hanging there. I think the existence of a well-armed population serves as a deterrent to tyranny. You don't need to be able to win the war, but at least the existence might give some pause. I can list tyrannical country after tyrannical country. The first thing they did was disarm people. The Nazis go down the list. It was one of the first moves of any authoritarians to disarm the people. After Hurricane Katrina, the National Guard went door to door disarming people. That was quite deliberate. It's history that plays out over and over again. So I think your point's well taken. I don't think there's any match of firepower. I don't think you need to have a one-to-one match for that sort of anti-insurrection threat to exist. Very good question. Yes, over there? Mm-hmm. Okay, very good question. In this presentation, I've only said the right to share the files. I think actually printing the guns will be separate. So, do you have a right to have a plastic weapon that's non-detectable? I think the Undetectable Firearm Act, which requires metal, I think that's a valid law, right? So I think having some quantity of metal would be permissible. What the state requires is to put a serial number on your plastic gun. I think that law would also be okay under Heller, the Second Amendment case I mentioned earlier. So long as a number can be given, there are some states that just won't give you a number at all, as long as you can actually obtain this. That means you have a gun that's traceable as a number on it, and a gun that has some quantity of metal that's detectable. I think if you take care of those two things, the plastic gun issue basically goes away. Again, these are awful guns. It's mostly a political statement. People make these to be like rebels, right? They make it to sort of stick it to the man. These aren't actually useful weapons for any meaningful sense. If I want a useful gun illegally, I'll just buy one on a corner somewhere. You go to Craigslist, you can find it. I mean, it's not hard to find it. Yeah, right there in the front.
Yeah, good question for you. So I know that's not your argument, but can you possibly give an example of when you might be okay for the state to pass a law banning access to these materials online that wouldn't, that passes strict scrutiny?
Yeah.
I mean, given the rash of recent mashing into the U.S., I know you talked about how these guns in particular aren't necessarily reliable or useful in sort of one shot. But given the clear link between the ability to print a gun and file online, it seems that there might be a palpable argument for when a state could pass a law that would pass strict scrutiny, right?
Well, there have been other contexts where the court says that when you're dealing with speech, you have to be more precise, more narrowly tailored. That is, you ban the end product, not the files used to get there. Right? So I don't think these sorts of laws can pass strict scrutiny. Maybe if you drew one that was very narrow, that defined very specific files, possibly, but I'm skeptical. Let me give you an example. New Jersey enacted a statute which we've challenged in court. The statute basically says that any part that can be used to make a gun is considered contraband. If I 3D print a screw that can be used to make a gun, I am now liable for a strict liability offense. Right? The New Jersey law even says that if your file can be modified, you're holding contraband. So let's say I make a file to make a toy gun, and someone tweaks it and makes it a functional gun. Right? You see these people who go like a cosplay, right? They make these very realistic looking weapons, and someone just tweaks it and puts some hardware in the middle. Right? The person who puts the cosplay gun online, now there's a strict liability offense. So the New Jersey statute, which is the only statute that really exists in the States, is so unconstitutional. No court wants to rule, and they keep killing us in these sort of procedural issues because they don't want to touch it. But if you actually look at the statute, it would criminalize huge swaths of human interaction. The federal law that was recently, the feds put forward a rule that is better. I think it still has problems, but it's better. The federal law at least says that certain types of expressive CAD files are protected. Other files aren't. But at least the feds recognize that you can't have this sort of broad prohibition on lots of files. Good question. Yes.
I'm wondering if, in your argument, you distinguish between the code used for 3D printing guns and malicious code whose sole purpose might be to take down a
Like a virus or something?
Yes.
Yeah, I get this question a lot. Have you heard of the Stuxnet right? This was this huge virus. It was Iran. Yeah, it was Iran. Basically, this huge virus that can be used to take down internal systems. The courts haven't had to consider whether something like a Stuxnet virus is protected speech. My general thought is that the executable, right, the actual thing that executes, that is not protected speech, right? That's something that just runs automatically. But the code, the source code used to get there, I think may very well have protected value. There were efforts in the 90s to basically censor cryptography, right? Code that can be used to create algorithms that encrypt stuff. And I think those algorithms have protected value, their speech. People, and if there are any coders in the room, coders will tell you that it's a form of art. They are expressing themselves with structure. It's something that you do internally, the same way an artist has a paintbrush or perhaps a sculptor has clay. Coders have code, that's what they use. And I think you do have to recognize that there's expressive value there.
Do you see, I mean, most malicious code is self-executing, right? So do you, is that a distinction?
In other words, let's say that I trigger a virus. I don't think I can raise the First Amendment as a defense. Now, if you go after the programmer, I think that's a harder deal, who actually developed the code in the first place.
Or the presence of the code on a hard drive.
Right, but you have things like, trespass, right? To actually insert the code is itself a crime. So I think there are ways of prosecuting this sort of conduct without going after unauthorized access, right? There are different things you can go after them. Computer Fraud Abuse Act, without going after the actual coder. Yeah. Yep. Oh, you gave me another hobby horse. Well, the Supreme Court has broadly read federal power, and it's not just Commerce Clause. Raich was a necessary and proper clause case. People don't remember this. My colleague Brandon Burnett argued Raich, so I'm obligated to remind people. Under modern law, Congress can regulate local activity as long as that local activity in the aggregate substantially affects interstate commerce. And Congress can regulate local activity as part of a broader regulatory scheme. So I think federal power here is almost plenary, almost complete. If Congress wants to regulate this, I think they have the power to do it. But whether the power to do it doesn't tell you whether the First Amendment restricts such laws. My focus here is primarily on the First Amendment, but Raich definitely is a sore spot for me. And no, I've never used medical marijuana. Never used it. Never touched the stuff. Yes?
Yeah, but another question. So you talk about this right to make arms. You sort of draw from the Second Amendment. I'm curious to what extent, like how far can you stretch that? How far can you carry that, right? In terms of, do I have a right necessarily to, let's say I go and I get the Anarchist Cookbook and I acquire materials to make a bomb, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that qualify as an arm? That right to make arms theory you kind of put forward?
Okay. The Supreme Court hasn't said much about what an arm is. But I think at a minimum, an arm has to resemble the sorts of rifles used at the time of the framing or their descendants. I don't know that a bomb would be that sort of lineal descendant. I don't think it would fit. Good question. I see people starting to pack up. I'm very short on time. Yes, in the back, last row. Look at what? What is it? Yeah. Yes. Well, you can have source code that's copyrighted. You can have protection for certain different types of source code. But the argument here is whether the First Amendment allows you to prohibit sharing it. No one's argued that it's a crime to make the code. The only question is whether you can send it to someone else, right? Generally, if you have information, you can share it. But here the government said that sharing it itself is a crime. Good question. Okay, people getting up. If you have other questions, please come up. But thank you so much for your attention.